Hello and welcome to the Riyal Deal, coming to you from the Al Arabiya English studios. This is your weekly bulletin, bringing you all the latest business news headlines and analysis from Saudi Arabia. Coming up, another week, another upgrade. The IMF raises its 2025 economic growth forecast for Saudi Arabia and now expects 4% GDP growth in 2025 and 2026. That's up from earlier estimates. Saudi Arabia rises up Mercer's annual global pension index and gets an upgrade from C+ to B grade rating. We ask why and what needs to be done to get an A grade. And hot on the heels of Saudi Arabia's first Nobel Prize for chemistry, we discuss academia's place in Vision 2030. Meanwhile, the kingdom has just risen up the world university rankings in one major survey. And a new era of off-road racing has begun in Saudi Arabia with the world's first hydrogen-powered race car, which emits only water vapor. Now to our top story. The International Monetary Fund has announced that it is raising Saudi Arabia's 2025 economic growth forecast. Citing a quicker than expected rebound in oil production, the IMF now expects GDP growth to the tune of 4% for the kingdom. That's up from a 3% projection 6 months ago. Well, the IMF has also raised its 2026 outlook fractionally to 4% as well. Well, Saudi Arabia is the world's top crude exporter, but the kingdom is in the midst of a vast economic transformation plan aimed at diversifying revenue sources. Well, for more, I'm joined now by Jameel Ahmad, who is the Global Markets Commentator and Chief Analyst at GTC. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Jameel. As we were saying in the introduction, another week has gone by and we've got another upgrade for the Saudi economy, this time the IMF upgrading GDP forecast growth. I mean, what has the IMF said in its World Economic Outlook about Saudi Arabia?
So essentially, if we compare what the IMF were looking for back in April, they were expecting growth somewhere around 3%. That got upgraded at that time to 3.4 and 3.6%, around that range. This week, they've come out in their World Economic Outlook to expect 4% growth GDP for 2025 and 4% growth in 2026 as well. So we've seen another upward revision. And actually, this is successive weeks that we're talking about further upgrades for the Saudi Arabian economy. And last week, we were speaking about the World Bank. We also spoke about the OECD just the week before. And of course, we also spoke about the previous IMF upgrade. So it seems that the world leading institutions and think tanks are all on the same wavelength, that the Saudi Arabian economy needs to be upgraded for its GDP forecasts. And it seems like despite global economic weakness and some concerns about the global economy when it comes to trade tariffs and some other uncertainties, that the Saudi Arabian economy actually continues to buck some of the more pessimistic trends elsewhere. And it wouldn't surprise me if we have more upgrades between now and the end of the Q4 2025 as well.
Okay, so since we last spoke 7 days ago or so, how has the main Saudi stock index been performing?
We've had another positive week for the Tadawul. We actually went up around 1% following the inflation data earlier this week that showed that headline inflation had slowed slightly from the previous month. Essentially, the slowing down in inflation is seen as supporting the economy when it comes to consumer spending and investment at a time when many businesses and industries are continuing to load up more money and longer term investments into the Gulf. I would also look at some of the other global economic market movements. For example, Wall Street had some more record highs this week. It seems that investor sentiment is still very much positive towards emerging markets based on US interest rate policy. I would look a little bit more towards the upcoming risk between the US and China, which seems to be hitting another, I would say, trade tariff dispute, and whether that impacts emerging market sentiment this week, next week. However, as far as the trading quarter goes so far, we've had a positive October for the Tadawul index.
Okay, and we've talked quite a bit the last few weeks on this channel about gold prices hitting, well, every day there seems to be a new all-time high. At least that's been the case in the last few weeks. What about silver? Is silver catching up, do you think?
Silver is catching up, and it was only a couple of days ago silver hit its highest level in around 10 years, and that's now been followed by historic highs for the silver price too. I think essentially that investors are diversifying more in towards metals. Of course, we've talked about the gold rally. Gold price is up another near 10% since the last time we talked. And as of today, it was nearly 4,400 US dollars. I still expect that despite both silver and gold looking very overbought on a technical basis, and actually there's no justification for some of these moves we're seeing in the markets, but the more that investors seem to be very much on this one-sided trade, and with some of the macroeconomic backdrop from lower interest rate expectations in the United States, ongoing government shutdowns, which is also positively leading towards more of a consensus that US central bank interest rates need to come down. It seems like it's going to be more positive for precious metals, at least over the near term. And emerging markets, including the Tadawul and the Saudi Arabian index, can also, I would say, jump on that trend too.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, you mentioned the US government shutdown there. We've had 3 weeks now of this shutdown, more or less. I mean, could this have any impact, do you think, on the Saudi Arabian economy?
It could do in terms of the financial market. There's two different ways to look at this. Firstly, if this government shutdown actually does continue into the third trading week, which would be next week, the expectations are going to increase even higher that it's going to impact the US economy. Therefore, it's going to impact the pressure that the US central bank are already under to cut interest rates. Should the interest rates continue to go down in the US, that means they will continue to go down in the region, including in Saudi Arabia. And at the same point, historically, lower interest rate policy and just that narrative is actually a positive for emerging market sentiment. Of course, Saudi Arabia is an emerging market, so that is also going to help matters. And let's see whether the government shutdown does conclude. But at the moment, it seems like it might go on for the rest of October because we have no positive headlines yet that is set to conclude in the United States.
Okay, well, we appreciate you taking the time to talk us through that. Thank you very much indeed. Jameel Ahmad, Global Markets Commentator and Chief Analyst at GTC. Thank you very much for your time. Let's take a quick look at some of the other stories from the past week. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has unveiled plans for a massive new development in Mecca, adjacent to the Grand Mosque. Well, the project, named King Salman Gate, will span 12 million square meters and include residential units, hotels, commercial spaces, and capacity for 900,000 worshippers. Well, backed by the Kingdom's Sovereign Wealth Fund, the initiative is expected to create more than 300,000 jobs by the year 2036. An electricity interconnection project between Egypt and Saudi Arabia is now 95% complete. Phase 1 of the $1.8 billion system will go live by the end of this year or early 2026. The high voltage system will connect Cairo to Medina through a 3,000 megawatt transmission line and will be a major step towards regional energy integration and grid stability. And Saudi Arabia is set to impose a new tax system on sweetened drinks. Well, the new levy, which will be calculated by the amount of sugar per 100 millilitres, will come into effect in January. While studies link sugary drinks to a number of serious health conditions. Now, every year, Mercer publishes its Global Pension Index. That's a major study which compares the retirement income systems in some 52 different countries. Well, according to the 2025 index, Saudi Arabia has risen the rankings with an improved score versus last year and an improved overall grade from C+ to B grade. Well, this positions the kingdom on par with more mature systems like Switzerland and Canada. So what is behind this improvement and what else does the survey reveal? Well, I'm joined now by Tarek Lotfy, who is the Mercer president of India, Middle East and Africa. Tarek, thanks for coming to see us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start by talking about Saudi Arabia's improved ranking, improved grade. I mean, what are the most significant factors behind this?
Well, as you said, this is a study that we've been doing for 17 years now. So we study, review, evaluate and compare about 52 countries and retirement systems of 52 countries around the world, covering about 65% of the global population. Saudi Arabia this year is one of 8 countries to improve their ranking from C+ to B. And it's really a number of factors around what we call the 3 pillars of pension fund design: adequacy, sustainability, and integrity. And Saudi Arabia has made progress across all 3 of those. And it's a culmination of several years of work. It's not one single factor. It's a culmination of several years of work that they've been, their focus has been on this. It's been a priority for them from a policymaking perspective. It's primarily around this year, around more comprehensive data on minimum pension levels. They've also made changes and revisions to contribution and accrual rates for new entrants into the scheme. And over the course of the last 18 months, there's been a number of legislative actions around the state pension age, which is now 65 in Saudi Arabia, as well as a variety of other things that have contributed to the strength of the system. It's already a very robust system with some very strong features, and they've done a lot of work specifically on the areas of integrity and adequacy.
Right, so reforms have been a factor in this improved rating over the past 12 months.
Absolutely. And the work that we do at Mercer is not just assessing and rating these pension schemes in a moment in time, but it's also providing really valuable insight around what reforms are needed and how those reforms can have an impact on improving those scores and the sustainability and the adequacy of those systems. So a lot of the work that we do with our clients is the rating is one thing, but it's also advising them on how to improve and how to reform, how and where to reform.
So Saudi Arabia, as we were saying in the introduction, is now ranked alongside the likes of Switzerland and Canada. That's in the B grade category. What needs to be done to close the gap and make Saudi Arabia A grade?
So I think they're in fantastic company. If you think about the journey they've been on over the past several years, they're in fantastic company already with the group that they're in. In terms of what can be done to improve and where we can see some reform, and they share these opportunities as well with the other countries who they share the same rating with, and so it's not unique just to Saudi Arabia. The first thing I would say is the increase in the minimum level of pension provided to the poorest and the eldest in their systems. The second would be to increase coverage to include employees in occupational schemes. And the third, along with longer lifespans, would be to drive more participation rates, particularly in the older segment of the working economy. And so there's a few things that they have at their disposal in terms of reform or in terms of things they can focus on. Again, it's not unique just to Saudi Arabia, but they share this with a number of other countries and mature systems around the world.
And what about the region? How does Saudi compare to the other countries in the region that you look after, namely this region?
Well, this was a really exciting issue for us because Saudi Arabia is now in its 8th year in our index. The UAE is in their 5th year. We had Kuwait and Oman debut this year. And so we're starting to get a broader representation from the Middle East, which is exciting. And really, it's reflective of the conversation that's taking place on the ground. And so if you look at the priorities today from an economic and a societal perspective, retirement, savings adequacy, financial security is top of the agenda. And we're seeing that not only in the reforms in the existing members of our index, but also in the new entrants in Kuwait and Oman. So the narrative is changing across the region, and it's an exciting time to be doing this kind of work.
But of course, Saudi Arabia always looking to attract top talent in multiple sectors, especially the sectors where they're aiming to grow and achieve the greatest results. How much does a pension package feature in the sort of the list of desirable factors inside an overall remuneration package?
Yeah, it features pretty high. And so you have this incredibly well-articulated and ambitious Vision 2030. And it's fantastic to see the way the public sector and the private sector has rallied around Vision 2030 and the progress that the kingdom's made over the past several years. A big part of their ability to be successful is their ability to attract and retain talent. And whether it's the work that we see in the public pension funds or the private sector pension funds that are complementing what exists already, that's a big part of their ability to drive a vibrant society, a thriving economy. And if you look at a lot of the tenets of Vision 2030, empowering individuals, fostering social development, a stable and productive and engaged workforce, a lot of these require a robust pension system, again, that goes back to being adequate, sustainable, and having integrity. And they've made massive strides in that area.
And so are we therefore starting to see companies do an awful lot when it comes to changing what they offer future employees and existing employees when it comes to their retirement scheme?
So I think that's a work in progress. And like anything, the private sector partners or supplements or complements what already exists in the public sector. And so sometimes the private sector can move faster, they can bring efficiency, they can bring competitiveness. In many cases, you're seeing private sector focus on alternative saving schemes to supplement what already exists and to make sure that we have savings adequacy in the system. You're also seeing private sector launch specific targeted schemes for a specific segment of the workforce. And so yes, you are seeing the private sector come along and partner or supplement what already exists from a public sector perspective. And that's important and it's necessary for the economies in the region to be sustainable and to continue to attract and retain talent.
Saudi Arabia's got a young population, hasn't it? And I'm just wondering, perhaps you're seeing any trends when it comes to that young population? I mean, obviously the gig economy around the world is something that didn't exist 10 years ago, but now it does, and it's obviously being embraced in a major way in Saudi Arabia. Are you seeing those young people starting out, perhaps some of them entrepreneurs, freelancers, are they making provisions for their old age, do you think?
Well, I mean, the world's changed, so you're right. I mean, there's a couple of macro trends that are driving things. One is people are living longer and spending longer time in retirement and working longer. And the other is this gig economy or non-traditional sectors that typically leave gaps in savings or gaps in pension plans. And so there's been a huge effort, and we do a lot of this at Mercer in terms of increasing awareness around financial stability or financial security. And so you are seeing the younger generation start to understand what retirement planning looks like, how they should be thinking about that, and how they should plan for the future. And that's dovetailing really well with the work that the government is doing and the priority the government is placing around this.
And just tell us, why do you carry out this survey? What are you seeking to achieve when you do it?
So again, the world is changing very quickly, and if these pension systems and plans don't adapt, they run the risk of falling behind and facing funding issues. So again, longer lifespans means people spend longer time in retirement, which has a drain on funding and payouts. An aging workforce means the ratio of active workers to retirees is reducing, and that again has strain on payouts. The gig economy, which you mentioned, and non-traditional working, again, has gaps in the system, and if they aren't addressed, these pension plans run the risk of being left behind or being underfunded and not being able to contribute in the way that they want to again, vibrant, inclusive economies where people have financial well-being. So the reason we do this at Mercer and the work that we do is A, to understand where everyone stands, but B, and I think more importantly, is to provide insight as to how we can improve some of the risks that we see, some of the challenges we see, and where we see opportunities to improve, to make sure that these pension schemes and retirement systems are able to support and again deliver on vibrant economies and thriving societies.
Okay, and just lastly, Tarek, I mean, looking forward to 2026, would you expect to see Saudi Arabia continue to go up the charts? Would you see perhaps that A grade perhaps looming in the not so very distant future?
I know the kingdom is incredibly ambitious, and I know they have their sights set on many milestones, and I'm confident they'll continue to look at how they can reform and how they can increase their attractiveness and their competitiveness on a global scale. So I'm confident we'll see progress.
All right, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, Tarek Lotfy, Mercer President of India, Middle East and Africa. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Let's take a quick look at some of the other stories we're following for you now. The Riyadh-based bank Saudi Faransi has partnered with Southeast Asia's largest bank, DBS Group. This in a bid to boost trade finance and payment flows between Asia and Saudi Arabia. Well, annual trade between Southeast Asia and the GCC is already close to the $130 billion mark, and DBS expects to grow by $50 billion by the year 2027. Well, Saudi Arabia is, of course, the GCC's largest economy. The Red Sea Edition has officially opened its doors in Saudi Arabia, becoming the very first hotel on Shura Island. Well, developed in collaboration with Red Sea Global and Marriott International, the property is located along the kingdom's western coastline, and it features 240 rooms, multiple swimming pools, and refined dining. Well, this is seen as a key step in a multi-billion-dollar push to turn the Red Sea coastline into a global luxury tourism hub. And Scotland's Heriot-Watt University is to establish a branch of the university in Saudi Arabia. More than 25,000 students are enrolled at Heriot-Watt at 5 campuses around the world. And students enrolled at the Saudi campus will be allowed to study at any of the university's international locations. Well, that leads us neatly into our next segment, a focus on academia and the kingdom's rising global status as a research hub. Well, Stanford University has just named 14 researchers from Saudi Arabia's Al Faisal University as being among the world's top 2% of scientists. Well, this news comes hot on the heels of the announcement of Saudi Arabia's first Nobel Prize winner for chemistry, Professor Omar Yaghi. Well, his groundbreaking work is already powering technologies that generate water from air. Well, Professor Yaghi is calling on young Saudis to embrace science and innovation. Let's listen now to what he told Al Arabia's Fatma Fahad.
I think the kingdom is going through an amazing transformation to become an important contributor to the world scene of science. And not just science, but also technology. And you can see every day different initiatives, such as the 2030 initiative, which is an important initiative for evolving the science in the kingdom. This is very important. The kingdom has a lot of smart people, and especially in universities, and these initiatives are very important at providing them opportunities, opening the door for them to experience and achieve their potential.
The Nobel laureate, Professor Omar Yanki, speaking there. Now, Kwakwa Simmons, also known as QS, is the world's leading provider of services, analytics and insight to the global higher education sector. They've just released their annual World University Rankings. Well, in the Arab region, 35 Saudi institutions feature in the QS ranking, with Saudi Arabia's King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals in the top spot across the region. Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined now by Ashwin Fernandes, who is the Executive Director for the Middle East at QS. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Ashwin. And just want to start by asking you, why is it that Saudi Arabia is so dominant on the regional landscape when it comes to higher education? Is it about investment, do you think?
Indeed, Tom. So it's a fascinating time for higher education in the Arab region as a whole. And we've seen Saudi Arabia, with the focus on the Saudi Vision 2030, has placed importance on research and innovation. And one of the pillars of rankings, and in this case QS rankings, is looking at academic reputation, also looking at research excellence in the higher education sector. And we can see that the focus, and we've just seen the Nobel Prize coming out and awarded to a Saudi scientist, and that just shows the focus which the kingdom is having to build those global powerhouses which are going to transform the nation into a knowledge economy, actually has started to reflect in the rankings. And the Arab region ranking, which we just launched yesterday, is a testament to that success of Saudi universities already creating a mark for themselves on a global stage.
So do you think it's fair to say that there is a direct correlation between investment and excellence when it comes to these academic institutions?
Indeed, Tom. One of the areas where institutions around the world do well, and we've seen them, is the investment they would put into infrastructure, into research, into innovation, into student learning outcomes. And the rankings are a byproduct of what happens at the institution. So definitely investment in these key areas would mean that they will start to reflect in the rankings in due course.
Now, I want to ask you about the top performing university in the region, which is Saudi Arabia's King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals. It's ranked first for 3 years in a row. And I just want to ask you, what makes that institution, do you think, stand out amongst all the others?
Fascinating results for King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals. And the top 10, there are 3 Saudi universities. King Fahd particularly does very well with employee engagement. And of course, they're based in the Haran region. They have good connect with employers. They do great work in the research area. And they've used, they've kind of, if you hear the president speak, we've heard him how AI has been integrated in every aspect of the institution. So employer reputation, key area, research impact, another key area which King Fahd University does really well.
Okay, and it looks like Saudi Arabia, according to your survey, has got the edge when it comes to so-called elite universities. And I'm just wondering, what defines an elite university? How do you classify one?
So there are 4 pillars which would define a good university. And of course, the first most important is the research impact, and this is really key for being a global university. The second is having the connectivity with the employers. What do employers feel about your institution? Do they value the graduates coming out? And the third is the teaching. Are you providing good quality teaching? You have the right pedagogy in place. And the fourth is internationalization. And Saudi Arabia has understood what it takes very early on and has put that in a strategic plan of the institutions. The Saudi vision further enhanced that and propelled that forward by putting a target for institutions to get at 5 Saudi institutions in the top 200 of the world. And today we have 3 in the QS World University ranking, 2 more to go. And now the government is seeing how they can have more institutions being represented in the World University rankings. The Saudi presence in the Arab region ranking has got 35 institutions, and we can see that they are, of course, not one of the highest represented countries, but they do really well in the 4 areas, the 4 quadrants which I'm talking about.
Okay, so just before we crossed you, we were talking about how Stanford University has named 14 researchers from Saudi Arabia as being, some of the world's top scientists there at Al Faisal University. I mean, I'm assuming that looking at your rankings and your report and everything you've told us, I mean, that surely comes as no surprise.
Indeed. There was a time where, Saudi Arabia, of course, even now attracts international faculty. But over the last many years, those international faculties have upskilled the faculty in Saudi Arabia. There has been a push in the last decade to send students abroad to go and study their postgraduate programs and come back into Saudi Arabia to give back to the nation. And they are the ones who are actually transforming the research landscape. So I'm not surprised that Saudi Arabia has a great representation, especially Al Faisal University, in the Stanford's 2% list.
And of course, Vision 2030, seeks to make the kingdom a global hub for innovation and education. I mean, by the sounds of what you're telling us, I mean, it's already there, isn't it?
So in QS ranking, we already have 3 in the top 200. And there is, of course, desire to have more because there's a direct impact of top universities with the knowledge economy and with economic prosperity. So if Saudi Arabia wants to be a knowledge hub in the region, move away from the dependency on oil, have the services sector, higher education will play a really vital role. So while we have 3, how do we get them in the top 100 is the next question, because we already have 1 institution, and KFUPM is already in the top 100 at rank 67. So we need to see how we can push that forward, how these institutions which we have, which are 3 in the top 200 and 35 in the Arab region from Saudi Arabia, can make their way up, not just for the ranking, but the contribution they would make to the society and to the economic prosperity of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Ashwin, just before we crossed to you, we were talking about how Saudi Arabia has had this first Nobel Prize winner for chemistry, Professor Omar Yaghi, and we heard a clip from him as well. I'm just wondering whether you think we're going to be seeing more people like that winning Nobel Prizes from the kingdom.
Indeed. I have visited almost many of the top universities. I mean, right from the main cities of Jeddah, Riyadh, or Dammam, and also beyond that, and some great work happening there, which actually impacts the community. And a lot of researchers in the kingdom are working how they can resolve matters which are related and are close to the people. So we will still see the focus on research, on innovation, on inventions taking place even more. King Saud University is another great institution which is doing some groundbreaking work in research. And we have King Abdulaziz University as well. So all the 3 major cities which are there are doing some great work, but also cities like Abha, which we have King Khalid University doing some good work in the medical area. And we have up north, we have institutions, Qasim region and Qasim University are doing some work in agriculture and veterinary sciences. So I will not be surprised if we had more of such Nobel Prize winners in the future coming out of Saudi Arabia, with the focus what Mohammed bin Salman has and the vision he has to create for the economy and for the country in general.
Okay, well, we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed. Ashwin Fernandes, Executive Director for the Middle East at QS. Thank you very much indeed, sir. And just before we go, a new era in off-road racing has begun in Saudi Arabia. This with the world's first hydrogen-powered race cars. Well, the Extreme H series made its debut in the rocky terrain of Qiddiya, which is close to the capital, and vehicles there powered by hydrogen fuel cells, which emit only water vapor. Well, these vehicles are designed for tough terrain, and they offer us some glimpses of what racing in the future might look like. Well, let's listen to what Mark Grain, the technical director at Extreme H, had to say about the sport.
So we want to push on for the next energy source, the next level of technology, and we thought that hydrogen was the right way to go. So we've developed an all-new car. It looks similar to the previous Extreme E car, but actually it's very, very removed. Suspension geometries and so on, and all those great lessons we learned in Extreme E have been carried over to Extreme H.
Yeah, the future there of motor racing. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much indeed for watching the Riyal Deal here on Al Arabiya English. Thanks for watching. See you again next week.